Uber podcast.
Like that whole design, we had no idea that it existed because we thought everything had gone just basically from, I'm sorry to say this one more time, breast bags to corsets, and that there was their transition. But in fact, there was a transition to the modern bra that was abandoned in favor of the corset, quite unfortunately.
Yeah, and there was even, they even found a picture there of a 13-year-old boy with the bra on his head saying he was Mickey Mouse.
That's right.
So that was proof. So we covered the corset, like you said, in our full-length episode, so you can go listen to that. But very briefly, corset, the word means corpus in Latin for body. And women would wear these corsets that were, they had wood or bone, later on that had steel. And it would basically shape their torso, it would cinch that waist in, and it would flatten their breast. And they were very restrictive, they were very painful, and they did actual real damage to their bodies in bedtimes.
Oh yeah, like they had trouble digesting, had trouble breathing. You remember you could train your waist to stay that small. We talked a lot about this in the corset episode, but the big problem with corsets, aside from all of that, is that they supported the breast from the bottom up.
Yes.
And the thing that really differentiated bras from everything else up to that point was that they went the other way. They harnessed the power of the shoulder to hold the breasts up from beneath, not push them up, but hold them, suspend them, almost like a pair of breast bags hanging down over your shoulder.
There you go again.
I can't help myself now. I've been told not to do something.
These are the great episodes where I just sometimes like to sit back and watch you dig into a big giant hole.
Turn into a 13-year-old boy with a serious cat.
So this was going on. The corsets were terrible. Women hated them. And by the mid-19th century, like you said, they said, you got these strong shoulders. Why don't we use those? That's right. And the first modern bra patent was filed in 1863 by a guy named Luman Chapman. And he was living at least in Camden, New Jersey. And he had this very first over-the-shoulder design. And it was tightened in the back like a corset, but it was softer, it was made of stretchy fabric, and it had these cups. They were called breast puffs in the patent for the extra support and comfort, I think.
That is radically better than breast bags.
You said it again.
So, Luman Chapman, strangely enough, his design did not take off, although he does have the first patent. But a woman named Hermione Cadol, she created something that was basically like a corset, but it was a corset cut in two, and the top half very strongly resembled a modern bra. She called it the le bien-être, or well-being. And her stuff still didn't quite take off, I think because she was married to the corset still, the general corset design, which made sense because at the time, up until the early 20th century, if you didn't wear a corset, you were basically advertising that you had loose morals. So the corset was just it. Whether you hated corsets with all of your might, and a lot of women did, you still had to wear them just to be socially acceptable. So it would take, as far as legend goes, a very free-spirited, very wealthy socialite named Mary Phelps Jacobs to basically say, nuts to that. I'm tired of these corsets.
Excellent.
Those whalebone stays are protruding through this kind of sheer dress that I want to wear to this dance. Let me try something else. And she apparently instructed one of her maids,
that far behind.
A wealthy socialite, to
make
what we would consider the first modern bra out of some silk handkerchiefs and ribbon.
Yeah, she was only 19. We should point out that she moved to Paris later on and changed her name to, is it Caressa Crosby?
I think so.
Or Caress, I'm not sure if you pronounce that last E.
I'm not sure either.
But that was her final name. So Crosby had this idea when she was 19, and it was before an event that she was going to, a debutante ball. And she called it the backless brassiere, and people at the party loved it. I imagine women especially loved it. And she got a patent for this thing in 1914, and very unwisely sold the idea for a mere $1,500 to Warner Brothers Corset Company.
Yeah, who turned around and in the next 30 years made 10,000 times that amount from that patent.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about $38,000 that she was paid today for the patent, and they made about $225 million in today's money.
But she was rich anyway, right?
Yeah, she was rich anyway, and she was a super interesting person from what I saw. She, basically any famous author today that was writing in the 20s, she was like real good friends with. And she herself wrote too. I think she had a publishing house called Black Sun. But she wrote for a while pornography on commission from an Oklahoma oil man who couldn't get enough of her stuff. Like,
I mean, that's one of the sexist story.
That was one of the many things that she did in her life. She wrote pornography.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So World War I turns out to be a good thing if you're a woman, because steel is in short supply. The U.S. joins the war and says, you know what, we gotta have all the steel in this country go toward war munitions and battleships and stuff. And American women said, oh, great, because you know what has steel? My corset. Let's get rid of it and ditch these things for good. And elastic fabric started coming into the market. Latex came into the market. And so all of a sudden, American women could finally get rid of the corset in favor of this new invention called the brassiere. And, of course, we don't want you to be too comfortable, ladies. You might want to at least put a girdle on just to keep everything nice and cinched in.
Which is basically like Hermione Cadell's two-piece corset, but whatever.
Yeah.
Patriotism freed them from that social expectation of having to wear a corset, which is pretty great. But I saw that the steel that the corsets freed up equaled 28,000 tons, enough to make 2 battleships in World War I.
That's awesome.
So that's a lot of corset steel.
Yeah.
So this led to like a complete revolution in undergarments for women, right? So in the 20s, the one of the first bras was basically, there was a company called Boish Form, which held the breasts down and back into the left.
Wait, what was it called?
Boish Form, B-O-Y-S-H Form. And from what I could tell, they were basically saying boyish form.
Okay, that's what I was about to
But
say.
they shortened it by removing the I and changed it to Boish Form.
So, like, they'll never know.
Right. No one will ever get this trickery. But it was because that flapper style was very much slight and boyish. But then along came a company in the late 20s called Maiden Form. And they named themselves Maiden Form to kind of contradict Boyish Form, because one of their big things was, hey man, let's not be ashamed of these boobs and try to hide them. Let's accentuate these things. And boy, did they ever.
Yeah, I mean, in the World War II, in the age of the big buxom Hollywood bombshell era, people like Jane Russell, then in the 50s with Marilyn Monroe, and it's all this, sort of male ideal at the time is what we're getting at, is the bras sort of followed suit. But when these women came on the scene, that's when, if you look at TV shows from back then or advertisements, you see these bras that were very pointy, and I think they even called them bullet bras or torpedo bras.
Yeah.
And that was sort of all the rage, just because Hollywood's always sort of driving fashion in that way, and it certainly did back then, because Twiggy coming along in the 60s, their very sort of slim androgynous look, all of a sudden, in the 60s, bras were being thrown in the trash can. Like, we don't need bras at all.
Yeah, and then there was a guy, a designer, who's an avant-garde designer named Rudy Gernreich, and he came up with the No Bra in 1964, which is basically like what you would consider a bra today. It's meant to just kind of be there and be supportive, but also kind of fade into the background, which
Like
is the
quiet
antithesis.
friend. Like a quiet friend.
Exactly. But that's like the antithesis of the torpedo or bullet bra, which is going to take your eye clean out if you got too close to it. But this is, you can kind of see, like, we've gone from 20s where boyish form was all the rage, and to the exact opposite, to back to the 20s, and then it kind of swung
You had to
back
really
toward,
lean back into this jump shot.
Large,
Remember,
busty,
it's not like every other jump
kind
shot.
of thing, even more than before, because now it's not covered by a sweater. The torpedoes, it was all about accentuating the boobs upward and to the left, and then the Wonder Bra kind of really helped move that along. And what was really interesting is, I remember when the Wonder Bra came out in America, it was in the 90s, but it turns out that in the far-off land of Canada, it had been invented 30 years before. It just took 30 years to get down to America and become popular. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that is totally weird.
Yeah.
Canadians are too nice to insist. Like, by the way, we have a better bra up here.
Right. And then now things have swung back again to where they're like,
Early.
do you even need a bra? And a lot of people are like, I don't think you do. It's kind of a personal preference.
Yeah, it certainly can be, but I also think there's still very much a stigma.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's true. There's just no arguing that right now.
No, I mean, if you're a woman and you go waltzing into a conference meeting at your business and you're not wearing a bra, then someone's going to say something. I guarantee you.
Exactly. Yes. But I think
fair.
also, even if somebody didn't say something or it was okay with everybody else, from what I can tell, there's a certain psychological security blanket aspect to wearing a bra. If that's what you've been raised to do, to wear a bra.
Oh, for sure.
And to not do that would take a real psychological shift in how you feel and how secure you feel without it. And I was reading about train bras, because I didn't feel like I was enough of a creep as it is.
You're right. Oh, boy.
But from what I was reading about train bras, even if the girl doesn't need a bra yet for any real purpose, it provides like some kind of psychological thing that they're like, okay, I'm keeping up with my peers who actually do need a bra, or I'm going to like the 8th grade dance, or probably say 6th grade dance or something, and I want to wear this dress, but it's going to look weird if I'm not wearing a bra, so I need a bra.
Right.
So, and I think that kind of psychology continues on well into adulthood too, so that it would be weird feel weird to not wear a bra if that's what you've done your whole life.
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with your comfort level with your breast size.
Sure.
You know, not to get too personal, but like, if I had a dime for every time Emily was like, "You got to go get the delivery food at the door because I'm not wearing a bra."
Sure.
And you know, Emily has bigger boobs, so there, I said it. She might be more comfortable if she had smaller breasts. But I don't know. I'm gonna go home and ask her though.
Okay. I feel like we should sit in silence for 5 minutes.
So you mentioned Maidenform. We'll get to this later, but they were founded in 1929 by William and Ida Rosenthal, who invented or introduced at least the butter-based cup sizing system. But we'll get to that weird bit of
the fuck was that?
I still have no idea what's going on there. But in actually, it wasn't in a year from 1949 to 1963. They had a very, very successful print ad campaign called I Dream, which you can go look up online. And these ads, which were very racy at the time, of course, were women doing things topless with just their bra on. They would have on like a regular skirt that you would wear in that era, but no top, no blouse. And then they were dreaming. One lady was dreaming of being a firefighter, and she was fighting a fire with no shirt on. Or I dreamed I went back to school in my Maidenform bra, and it's a woman in her bra at a grammar school desk. Or I dreamed I won the election in my Maidenform bra. She's taking the stage on election night. And beyond these being, and old advertisements are all funny and awful in every way, but beyond this being funny and awful, it truly is kind of gross that what they're showing are things that are dreams for these women, like having a regular job and things that they may not have been allowed to do at the time.
Yeah, so, but at the time, like, yes, they were trying to sell their bras, and yes, there was, like, a certain amount of sex appeal to the whole campaign, but in their defense, like, this was a very, like, progressive, liberating ad campaign. It was conceived by 3 women. On one hand, and also it's not like they were like, haha, you couldn't possibly hold public office because you're a woman. It was like it was showing that women dream of this kind of stuff, that they want to do this kind of thing, and that at least in their dreams they're capable of doing this, rather than, we can't even talk about that, it's so preposterous, we couldn't even possibly create an ad campaign. So it was kind of like progressive in that sense. It's in retrospect that it's really cringy, but really what you're cringing at, it's not like Maidenform was making fun of women for not being able to do these things. It's more an indictment of society for them being restricted from these things at the time.
Yeah. This is one of these definitely where you could come at it from a lot of angles.
Sure.
And have opinions about it. But we should read, they had a contest in 1955 with the public about new dream ideas. And the winner from 1957, and Dave, God bless you for finding this, was I dreamed I danced the hornpipe with Sinbad the Sailor.
I don't want to lose LeBron. If I do this, I'm going to end. He's not going to resign.
I think we should approach a message break, and then we'll talk about the wacky world of bra sizing right after this. Hey friends, we've talked about it on the show before, about student loans and how they can drown you, but you shouldn't let it drown your future. You should make a splash with Splash Financial.
Yes, Splash Financial is your student loan refinance destination designed to help you save money on student loans. Their innovative technology gives you quick access to a best-in-class network of lenders, so you can get great rates and achieve your financial goals.
It takes just 2 minutes to get a rate quote and doesn't impact your credit score, so what are you waiting for? Splash even offers a low-rate guarantee. Just go to splashfinancial.com/no to start saving today. That's splashfinancial.com/KNOW. Start making a splash.
Hey Chuck, did you know that McDonald's, which you tend to think of as a pretty huge global restaurant, is actually a local one too?
That's right. Each McDonald's is owned and operated by people who live where that McDonald's is. When you eat at McDonald's, you're actually supporting American businesses.
You're also supporting farmers, and you're also supporting the Ronald McDonald House Charities. The Ronald McDonald House Charities give families with sick kids a home away to travel far for the care that they need, which is a pretty great charity, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, they've done great work over the years, and franchisees also care about their community. They give back by helping first responders. They have a program called Thank You Meal Program, which provides free food for essential healthcare workers and first responders. And when you own and operate a McDonald's, you make a promise to serve the community where you do business. And that's what those franchisees do every day.
Which is why they say, Chuck, McDonald's serving here.
Well, now we're on the road, driving in your truck. Want to learn a thing or two from Josh and Chuck. It's stuff you should know.
Zion's rebounds a
All right,
fucking
Chuck. So
C.
one thing that I've read is that American bras don't fit, and that there's a reason for that. Something like there's a statistic that 80% of women, American women at least, are wearing bras that don't fit, and supposedly that's kind of made up and based on anecdotal evidence, but it's been bandied about for so long that people take it as gospel. But regardless of whatever the statistic may or may not be, American bras are known for not fitting, and it's because American bra manufacturers have basically said, we've created a standard measuring scale, and it just is economically efficient for us to mass produce, this size to this size. And if you happen to fall outside of that size, you're SOL, and it's your fault. There's something wrong with your body for not adhering to the standard norm, body size norm. This is largely becoming a relic of the past, but it's still, from what I can tell, very much present when you go bra shopping.
Yeah, and I've heard this complaint from Emily over the years and a lot of women that, it's tough to find a bra that really fits well and feels good and does everything it's supposed to do. Then that's why when you find one, you order like 6 of them.
Yeah.
But there are these days, before we get into the sizing, that is changing some now with these more bespoke companies that have a more custom-made, tailored to your size kind of things. And I wonder why it took that long for someone to think outside the box and challenge a big brassiere and say, hey, you're doing it wrong. I bet there's a lot of money to be made from bespoke brassieres.
Yeah, from what I understand, there is. And although it's just now happening in the U.S., apparently it happened, I believe, back in the 90s in the UK with a movement called bra fitting, one word, where it's basically like, look, 2 measurements is not enough to create a perfect bra. You need a bunch of different measurements under different conditions. You need to take your shirt and bra all the way off. We need to get in there. And but when we're done, you're going to have a well-fitting bra. And it's just now catching on in the United States. And what's surprising is that, it's just now catching on, but this technique and the sizing standard that we use here in the United States goes back to I think the 20s, if not the 30s.
Yeah. Yeah, 1929 is when they found it Maidenform and introduced this cup sizing. And I'm not going to pretend to fully understand this, but I can read. Oh, you got it?
Yeah. You go ahead, though. I want to hear your test.
No, because what will happen is I'll read, and then you'll do it again in your own words. And then this episode is 15 minutes longer than it should be.
All right. You got my number. My number happens to be 34C. So the cup system is what it's called. It consists of 2 measurements and the difference between them. So the first measurement is the overbust, which is the circumference of your chest all the way around your body across the nipples. That's your overbust measurement, right?
Okay.
Now, if you'll also measure right below the breasts, all the way around your body, that's your underbust. And if you subtract those 2, you're going to come up with a difference in inches or centimeters, depending on where you are in the world. And you can use that as part of a handy table to say, oh, there's a 3-inch difference. That means that I'm a C cup, right? Because
that's where the lettering comes from.
Right. The difference between your underbust and your overbust generates some knowledge about the volume that your breasts are going to take up, which is your cup size. Got it?
Generates knowledge?
Yeah, exactly. So that underbust measurement is also used, and that's the number that comes before it. So if you're a 34C, that means your chest is 34 inches around at the ribcage under your breasts. And then if you're a C, that means that there's a 3-inch difference. That means that you are 37 inches around your chest.
Really, again?
And so you'd be a 34C. And then those 2 measurements are supposedly like
Wait.
all you need to come up with a fitting bra. But apparently that's
I
just
keep getting thrown off on certain animation
Yeah,
on this
that
guy.
all makes sense. I think the thing that confused me is the sister sizing
I understand that too.
thing. So if you have a 36C and a 34C brassiere, that's not the same cup size because a 34C is the only true C.
Yeah.
So if you want to go up a band size but not the cup size, you buy a 36B or a 38A. So the volume of the cup size is relative to the circumference of the band.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. I think the breakdown is that this sister sizing
Watch his
thing
hands, I guess.
has not been widely publicized to women. And so that they think like, well, if the band is a little tight and I'm a 36C, then I need to go up to a 38C. And that's just not the case.
Yeah, in music you want a tight band. In brassieres you don't.
Well, supposedly part of that bra fitting trend that started in the UK is that suggests that a tight band is the key to a good fitting bra. That's where most of your support comes, and that most women opt for a band size that's a little too loose. But the point is your cup volume does not go up when you go up a band size. It doesn't have to. So that means that a 34C, if you go down in band size, you go up in cup size, and your cup size would stay the same. So 34C is the same as a 32D. And then the other way, a a 34C is the same as a 36B. And
I
once
have a
you
rough game
understand
if
the
I'm
sister
slightly
size
late
of
every
the thing,
time.
then you can actually use this 2-measurement standard to find a bra that actually fits better.
That's right. And if you're wondering how this all works, it works with bra fitting models. There are women that get paid money to go in and get fit for thousands and thousands of bras and to get feedback. And this
It's gotta
all
be
started,
early.
well, it didn't completely start there, but in the 1970s,
Late
there
again.
was a singer
I'm
named
so
Dorothy
confused.
Galligan from New York answered an ad for a bra fitting model, and they said, you know what? I know this sounds sexist, and we probably, even though it's the 70s, shouldn't be saying this in an office, but you have the perfect 34Bs, and that's the standard size which we're designing our bras on. So for almost 20 years, Dorothy Galligan was the model in New York in the lingerie district that would work 10, 11, 12-hour days trying on thousands and thousands of bras and giving them feedback so they could go back to the sewing machine and redo it.
Yeah, because that's the other part of the problem with bras that don't necessarily fit. In addition to not making larger sizes and cup volumes and smaller sizes and cup volumes, like they're based around one woman's pair of breasts, and her breasts became the standard for the bra industry in the 20th century. So that if you could create a bra that fit Dorothy Galligan correctly as a 34B, you could use that to basically grow out from either way.
That's right.
So that's a real problem for women who have different shapes and sizes, and it's really sad to me to think that they were told for decades that, if your bra doesn't fit, something's wrong with your body.
You must have quit.
Exactly.
Well, here's the thing too. It's not just breast size. It's the, how big your back is and how the bra it holds the breast, the cups do, but it has to do with your shoulders and your back and your armpits and everything else. There's so many nuances to everybody's body, men and women, that I think until recently they were trying to do the best they could, but it was pretty narrow, the options that women had.
Yeah, I get the impression that they were not trying to do the best that they could. That they
Better be
basically
fucking
said,
early.
when we release a new bra, it comes in these sizes.
Well, doing the best they could for a huge industry that had to satisfy, tens of millions of different kind of
If it ever
bodies.
catches up and tells
They
me.
were kind of hamstrung. You
Early,
can't
okay.
have 450 bra sizes in manufacture on that scale.
Yeah, you can't mass manufacture, but I think that's what's being proven, like you were saying, by this new bespoke revolution.
So it's pretty easy to shoot off the dribble with this, but I'm not going to be shooting off the dribble, so it's like,
because you can say, hey, download our app and take these measurements using your phone and upload it, and then we'll just custom make some bras for you. And I also read that Poland makes really, really good fitting bras as well. I think it was a New York Times article about it. And the author traveled to Poland to verify this herself, and she said she didn't find the perfect bra, but she came away with 4 or 5 bras that were awfully close, way closer than she'd ever had before.
It's funny, after all these years, I still remember to not put a bra in a dryer because of the movie Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
I don't remember that part. No, I never saw it. That's why I don't remember that
It's
part.
great. John Cameron Mitchell, who also a friend of Movie Crush, he's a friend of Noel's. He played Hedwig and created the character and directed the film. But there's a scene where he's screaming, "Do not put a bra in a dryer. It warps." And I guess that's true because ever since then I've been like, no, if I'm doing laundry, I should not put a bra in a dryer.
It does do some weird things to it, although you can also put it in a laundry bag, and I think that keeps it from wrapping around stuff, which makes it it lasts longer. You can't put it in a dryer.
Oh, right. Yeah, like when a bra collects everything else in its wake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can not talk about Victoria's Secret.
And if I had a dime for every time you said that to me. Or as many dumb guys call it, Victoria's Secrets.
Yeah, dummies. So Victoria's Secret actually started out, husband and wife founded it in the 70s in the San Francisco area because the husband had gone to the department store to buy lingerie for his wife and was treated like a skell for it, right?
Even in San Francisco in the 70s?
I guess so. Department stores have always been a certain way no matter where you are. So he said, well, we need to create a lingerie store that's made for men to go buy for women, and that's what they created with Victoria's Secret. And it was semi-successful, and then they sold to a guy named Leslie Wexman, I believe it was Wexman, who had founded The Limited. And he took it, I think he bought it for $1 million, and within 2 decades it was worth $2 billion. And the guy who founded it with his wife, they ended up getting divorced, and he died broke and jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge, sadly enough. But Victoria's Secret dominated the bra industry in the United States for many, many decades until very recently when it was overthrown by women who said, enough.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Roy Raymond said, you know what we need is a store where men can go in and buy sexy lingerie for their wives. And what he failed to hear was the sound of tens of millions of women across the country saying, No, you don't.
Right. Well, that's what Leslie, I think it's Wexman. That's what he figured out, was that this thing was a good idea, but they had missed the mark, and that they were marketing toward men, and they were completely isolating women, because he said like these Victoria's Secret stores were lit with like weird kind of reddish lighting, and there were velvet couches and Oriental rugs, and he said it
Well,
wasn't.
I walked by them in the mall.
He said
very
no,
slowly.
this was like in the early '70s or late '70s and early '80s.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, all right. So he said, man, I would have loved to see this. He said they were Victorian, not like a Victorian foyer. They were like a Victorian brothel, basically, and it was like just chasing women away, attracting men, but women buy underwear for themselves way more than their husbands do. And so he kind of revamped it a little bit and turned it into something that women felt comfortable and actually wanted to go into.
Yeah, it's interesting. According to that
Early.
uplift that we mentioned earlier,
It's gotta be fucking early.
despite
Come on.
Victoria's Secret and its history,
Okay.
women have really been key to the development of
It's just
bras
that one
in the United
animation
States.
that's really jerky,
Over
and I gotta
1,200
figure it out,
US
because I'm
patents
late when I feel like
were
I'm like
bras
pretty much
between
dead on.
1863 and 1969, and half of those have been held by women. And in the industry, they have always held pretty important positions and been well regarded. Designers and managers, specialists, merchandising, promotional product managers. It is one industry where it seems that it's not been, here's a product for women run entirely by men.
Right. And rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is also a very famous legend as far as bras go, which is the burning of bras at a 1968 demonstration.
Yeah, not true, apparently.
No, it's a myth. There was in fact a demonstration outside of Miss America pageant in Atlantic City in 1968. It was the brainchild of Carol Hannish, who helped basically at this moment give birth to second wave feminism. And they actually had a trash can that said "Freedom Trash Can," and women threw stuff into it that they considered like shackles of the patriarchy, like false eyelashes, bras, lingerie, that kind of stuff. But there was no burning. That came from a reporter who suggested that they burn it as a nod to the burning of draft cards. But no one actually burned this stuff, but it became kind of set in stone as true, even though it really wasn't.
That's right. Big fat lie.
And then lastly, Chuck, I've got one extra thing. You ready?
Ready.
Do you have anything else?
I don't.
Do you need to wear a bra? It's a long-standing question. And apparently, the answer is no. At least as far as a study in France, a 15-year study, 300
See,
women
like,
aged 18
it's so hard to
to
explain, but
35.
sometimes
And the study
there's
found
like a
that women who did not wear bras developed more
a stopping
muscle
point, a visual
in their
stopping
breasts,
point,
ostensibly
and then you
providing
release.
support that the
And then
bras
other
didn't provide.
times it's smooth and you're
by
slightly late
proxy,
because of it.
if you
Right
did
there, I was
wear a
waiting
bra,
for this stopping
your
point.
the muscles in your breasts
I need to
were
train
less
my
permeable,
eyes.
and thus you would have more likely to have breasts that sag, or pendular breasts, than you would have if you didn't wear a bra. Kind of like you're making your breasts sink or swim. By
See, that was a
wearing
stopping
bra.
point.
So
That's the only reason I
it's just one
dreamed
study,
it.
but it is pretty surprising that they found basically the opposite.
I like that
of conventional
animation,
wisdom,
but
because most people
it's
say,
not likely to
you don't
show
wear a
up
bra,
every
your breasts
time,
will
you
get
know?
saggy, and that's apparently not true. Interesting. And I also ran across a weird question on Google. It has like suggested searches. What happens if we squeeze breast?
I don't know.
I didn't even bother to look. Just the question itself was good enough.
Oh, man.
You got anything else?
Early.
I got nothing else.
What about the bro or the man's ear?
Oh, yeah. Can't
Try to
forget
figure it
bro.
out.
Well, since we said bro, it's time for listener mail, everybody.
I'm going to call this More on Bidets. Hey, guys. Love the show. Thanks for all you do. It's especially meaningful in these crazy times. I'm currently hanging out in northern Japan on a trip that changed from a between-job snowboarding sabbatical in December to, well, I guess I live here for now. So your podcast is not a bad place to be, I would imagine. Should be for you, Adam. I'm sure you guys got a ton of similar emails to this, but in the bidets episode, you mentioned the type of toilet with a sink sprayer attachment nearby. In my experience, this is a super common thing in households in many lower-budget hotel accommodations in the Philippines and other Southeast Asian countries. It is awesome and commonly referred to as the bum gun.
That's easy. I like that one.
I don't know the
It's easy as fuck to time.
so I'm not sure if that term has been adopted domestically in various bum gun enthusiast countries, but like One Ring or Spidey's abilities, it has great power and must be wielded carefully. So bum gun wisely, my friends. That is from Adam.
Thanks a lot, Adam. And best of luck to you in your new home. Hang tight, buddy. Things will pass eventually. If you want to get in touch with us like Adam did and talk about bum guns or bras or what have you, you can send us an email to stuffpodcast@howstuffworks.com.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
I love that animation.
Hey, friends. this year, getting a head start on the holidays doesn't mean just putting up your lights before Thanksgiving. It means shopping and shipping early, too. FedEx is expecting a record number of packages will be shipped this holiday. It's going to be a shipping marathon, also known as the Shipathon. FedEx is training harder than ever to deliver packages quickly and safely. So, make sure you shop and ship early this season. Visit FedEx.com/holiday guide to learn more. You know, friends, over the last 12 years, Subaru of America Incorporated and its participating retailers donated more than $176 million to help those in need through the Subaru Share the Love event. And by the end of this, their 13th year, Subaru and the participating retailers they work with will have donated over $200 million to help those in need through the Subaru Share the Love event. So you can get a great vehicle and support a great cause all at the same time. With every new Subaru purchase or lease, Subaru will donate $250 to your choice of charities, November 19th
Yeah, for the
through
win.
January 4th.
Aww.
Hey, welcome
Early.
to Short Stuff. I'm Josh. There's Chuck. This is Short Stuff. We are talking about a little nursery rhyme, pretty adorable, means nature. You
I'll
may have
make
heard
it.
before.
Damn it.
It's called Mary Had
Oh,
a
wait a minute. Was this lamb's fleece as white as snow?
It was, and there was something remarkable about it in that wherever Mary went, the lamb went as well.
Sounds like a stalker to me.
A little bit. So this is pretty interesting in that this is controversial. I mean, this cute little nursery rhyme that every English-speaking kid on the planet has heard at one time or another, especially if you're raised in America, may have had, number one, a real-life origin, and number two, there are two towns in Massachusetts and New Hampshire where the local historical societies will fight each other with spike chains and brass knuckles if they run into one another in public.
Yeah, this is really interesting. In Sterling, Massachusetts, if you go, you're going to see a little copper statue of a little lamb, and it's
Fucking
Mary
joke,
Sawyer's
man.
little lamb specifically, which she brought to school in 1815.
Yeah.
She was a little girl who, and this, I guess we should say allegedly for all this stuff, because everyone's saying that each other is wrong. So allegedly, Mary saved this little lamb, nursed it back to health overnight, and over a few days, the lamb got much better, and then she was going to go to school one day, and her brother Nat said, "Hey, why don't you bring that lamb to school since you love it so much?"
Why'd you marry it?
And she did bring the lamb to school, hiding it in a basket under her chair, and at one point she stands up to take part in a recitation lesson, and the lamb bleats, the teacher laughs, she takes the lamb outside and kills it. No. She takes the lamb outside and stores it in the shed, but this caught the eye of a guy named John Rollstone.
Yeah, he was an older boy who I guess was visiting the schoolhouse where all this took place that day. He was on his way off to Ovid, and he died shortly after of tuberculosis. But before that, he wrote a poem, several lines, just basically what everybody knows from Mary Had a Little Lamb. Supposedly that night, he was so taken by this event, came back the next day on horseback and handed Mary the little poem he wrote for her. And Mary Sawyer went on for the rest of her life as Mary, the girl with the little lamb that she nursed back to health. And this the source of the famous nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, and it's important to note that he wrote but 3 stanzas of that poem, and I think he was just thought it was cute. I think it's an adorable story that not only did she nurse this little lamb and take it to school, but this, rising freshman at Harvard was so smitten with this whole thing on his little visit to the school that he wrote a poem about it.
That's right.
It's adorable.
And he died of tuberculosis later that year.
Yeah, point that out again.
So so John Ralston and Mary Sawyer are the source of the inspiration and the basis of that nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb, as far as Sterling, Massachusetts is concerned. But if you drive a little further north, about 90 miles north into New Hampshire, southwest New Hampshire, you come across the town of Newport, you will get a totally different story. That their position is basically that Mary Sawyer was a lying old lady who lied her whole life and made up this fantastic tale, and that it was really Sarah Josepha Hale, who was a native of Newport, New Hampshire, who was very famous for setting up the first Thanksgiving in the United States, like as a national holiday. She's the one that made that happen. That she's the one who wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Right, and I think we should take a break.
Okay.
And before we do that, I want to point out that Josh did not misspeak. Her middle name was Josepha, and not Joseph.
Or Josephine.
Yeah, it just sounded a little funny, and people might think, why did Josh spice that one up?
Put a little mustard.
So we'll come back and explain more about her story and where Henry Ford figures in.
Let's try something crazy, like wait on it or something. Shouldn't work, but
This episode is brought to you
I'm
by IBM.
getting a little
Today,
desperate.
every answer matters more than ever before. Because whether it's about health, deliveries, or finance, some things just can't wait. That's why IBM's helping businesses manage millions of calls, texts, and chats with Watson Assistant. It's conversational AI designed to help your customers find the answers they need faster, no matter the industry. Let's put smart to work. Visit IBM.com/Watson Assistant to learn more.
Hey everybody, you know Duncan? Well, Duncan knows that you're home from school early and that it's a little bit different this year, huh, Chuck?
Yeah, because a lot of us are distance learning. You might have like your little brother or little sister in your class, or your mom might be your RA in addition to your mom.
Yes, well, Duncan is here to lift your semester slump by offering and presenting and granting you your favorite snacks, your favorite drinks, like cold brew and iced matcha lattes and snackable bagel minis, too.
That's right. What you want to do is make some custom combos by getting all your favorite little items together.
It's a waste of time, I know, but can't help myself.
These papers that you're having to write.
It's going to help you get through 2020.
That's right.
So head to Duncan today and get your faves to make studying for finals that much sweeter. And don't forget one for your parents, because, after all, they're stuck living with you, too.
All right. So, Sarah, Josepha Hale.
I like Josepha, but I hadn't considered Josepha. That's a good one, too. That sounds really biblical. Like she suddenly just grew a beard without a mustache.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, like come to me, Josepha, let me put oils on your feet.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Remember what congressman was it that literally anointed someone's feet
Oh, it
with
was
oil?
Ashcroft, I think, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah, what a bizarre time. I think it was
Ashcroft. You're totally right.
He also sang some weird patriotic song about the eagle flying high around the same time. He got some bad press. Everybody was like, wow, you're bonkers, buddy.
Oh, man, I missed that guy. He was fun for the news cycle.
He really was.
All right, so Sarah Joseph
Fuck,
Hale,
I'm gonna have to try this.
Boston in 1828. She was a poet and a
Oh, it's
and she was
goofy.
actually the editor of the very first women's magazine in the U.S. called
I
Guy's
can't help
Ladies
myself,
Book.
because
And it was here in Boston that she
you're
got
used to
involved
D
with
Wade's
a
jumper, you know,
musician
because
and composer who said, you know what,
it's D Wade's jumper.
if we get some of these poems and set them to music, they would be called songs, and we can use these in schools to make little kids good, moral kids.
Why keep
When I
yanking me
think of
forward,
Lowell,
though?
this kind of folk musician, children's music study proponent guy, have you ever seen that Mr. Show where David Cross is like the guy who sculpted the little body that he moves from Appalachian folk art? That guy, that's who I think of when I think of this guy. You know, just kind of weird.
Fuck it, we'll try it.
Like his whole focus is learning to get music into schools for children. I don't know why, but it's really stuck in there.
You know, our buddy Scott Augerman wrote for Mr. Show, and it was kind of his entree into the entertainment industry. And he does a spot-on impression of Bob Odenkirk.
Oh yeah?
Oh, it's great.
I gotta see that.
It's very funny. All right, so Mason and Hale are writing songs together. They put 15 poems to music called Poems for Our Children. And we should point out that the original tune that they wrote for her version of Mary Had a Little Lamb was not the familiar melody that we know. That
Could end very badly.
Yeah, apparently that comes from a British song that goes, merrily we roll along, merrily we roll along over the dark blue sea.
Hey, nice.
Oh, thank you. I practiced pretty extensively for it.
It was on key.
I'm a little tone deaf.
It was a little pitchy, but it was fine.
Okay. I'll go with it was fun.
No, it was good. But yeah, that came on later. The original melody, I don't even think we know that, do we?
No, but if you can get your hands on Juvenile Lear, Lyre, that book that it was originally in, I think the notes are in there.
Okay.
It sounds like Inagata.
That's your go-to. So, Mary Sawyer, going back to her, the little girl who allegedly actually nursed this little lamb who followed her around and stalked her, she said, you know what, those first three verses of your poem, Ms. Hale, is exactly like the ones that John Rollstone wrote about my true story. What is up with that?
Yeah, I guess she just thought that somehow Sarah Josepha Hale had gotten her hands somehow on this poem that John Rollstone had written for her and just expanded on that. And Sarah Josepha Hale was like, no, that's not it at all. I made this whole thing up from scratch using strictly my imagination. I've never heard of you or your delightful little story from your childhood about the lamb.
It sounds totally made up, by the way.
Right, and so this was like, so now you had two upstanding women, Sarah Josepha Hale, the founder of the American holiday Thanksgiving, and Mary Sawyer, who went on to become the matron of her local hospital, were basically saying that one another was lying without saying that one another was lying. And two towns, like, reputations were on the line.
Yeah, and they actually, as older ladies, signed sworn statements saying that what they were saying was true and correct. And it kind of went on like this for a little while, and I promised Henry Ford, and we were going to deliver, because in 1927, automobile magnate Henry Ford got involved and was firmly in the Mary Sawyer camp. He was just a fan of hers, I guess, because he bought the original frame from that red schoolhouse and moved it to Sudbury, where he owned an inn. And he wrote a book about this called The Story of Mary and Her Little Lamb.
I find that him moving the inn to Sudbury confuses the story tremendously, because it just takes two small towns and adds a third one unnecessarily. Yeah.
Sure.
You know? But yes, Henry Ford wrote a 60-page book just basically touting Mary Sawyer's story, much to the chagrin of the town of Newport, New Hampshire, and its historical society. And to this day, they will say, like, Henry Ford made a great car. I don't know how he would be really as a historian, so, you know, his opinion is...
What I want to know is what was on the other 6 pages.
Right.
Did it take more than 4?
I know. I don't know what he talked about. My joke bone is broken because I can't come up with anything stupid to add.
Well, it depends on there are very much two camps here, and to this day, people that defend Hale, people that defend Sawyers are like, this is a sweet girl who had this sweet story. Why would she make this up and tell it her whole life?
Right.
And Hale defenders were like, well, why would she just conjure up this poem out of thin air? Or, why would she copy it and claim she conjured it from thin air? Because she wouldn't have even known about this poem.
Yeah, she just, from what I can tell, she doesn't seem like the type who would have committed plagiarism and then stuck to the lie her entire life.
Yeah.
It's a mystery, and even Henry Ford couldn't solve it. But to end this one, because we don't really have a resolution to it, there is, the full poem by Sarah Joseph Hale. It ends pretty cutely, because she's talking about how everyone wanted to know why the lamb loved Mary so much. And in the poem, it says, well, it's because Mary loves the lamb back. And then it ends with, and you each gentle animal in confidence may bind, and make them follow at your will, if only you are kind. Isn't that a sweet thing to teach little kids? Be kind to animals, and you can basically be the boss of them.
Yes, and you will never be a serial killer.
That's right, because you're kind to them rather than torturous.
That's right.
Well, that's it for Short Stuff, everybody. We're out.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
Not bad. Honestly, the off the dribble is never the problem.
Premiering Wednesdays at 9, 8 Central on National Geographic. Best for any industry.
Yeah, I don't know why people need to know the behind-the-scenes things, but home recording provides some challenges, and I was getting pretty frustrated, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to the studio.
Yep.
Because I know it'll sound great in here. Yeah. I know there won't be dogs or children. And everyone should feel good about it, because I have not seen another human being.
Yeah.
In the building.
Didn't the security guard try to run you off the road when you were parking?
He didn't try. He stopped me literally in the parking lot. I was like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I'm going to my job." And he said, "Okay."
He said, "Stay home, save lives."
But before we left, apparently since I left, they have these. There's a bottle of microphone sanitizer.
Whoa.
There are headphone sanitized, or not sanitized, but just disposable headphone covers.
Sweet.
And I feel more safe here than I do at my house.
What? Microphone sanitizer? That sounds really made up.
Yeah, it's, go ahead and buzz mark it. No, it won't, because it smells bad, and I didn't want to buzz mark it and say it smells bad. It's apple flavor.
Whoa.
Which would make Emily just, turn over in her bed.
It's a good Jolly Rancher flavor, not the best scent, though.
I hate it when they add scent to stuff that doesn't need scent.
Yeah, agreed.
Try finding an unscented garbage bag these days.
Is it tough to?
Yeah, man, every single one of them. I even got some that said unscented, and it still smells like something.
You missed it in parentheses underneath. It says mostly.
Yeah, 99% unscented.
Right, we can't help ourselves.
1% rosemary.
Well, I don't have my over-the-ear headphones right now. I just have earbuds. So I'm wearing one of Yumi's long scarves wrapped around my head twice to keep from your audio.
Here's something weird, is that my Team Takeover is bugged right now. It's still staying full.
Lawrence of Arabia, or like you just wandered in with a headed tree.
Yeah, then it kept slipping off.
I'm about to start fouling until they fucking take it off. Just to see how long it'll last for. That'd be funny.
Send me another picture.
It's not very comfortable.
I'm sure it'll go away after the quarter or some bullshit, but still.
Yeah, what was the deal with that whole toothache thing? Was there ice in there or something, or was it just just tied their chin shut?
Knowing that era, there were probably some sort of like razor blade and a heroin concoction that would just scrape the area where the tooth was.
Well, you can tell I'm already more comfortable because I'm up to 80-90% from 3, you know, ringing and everything.
Right. From the makers of microphone sanitizer.
Because obviously I've shot a lot of D-Wade
Let's get into
releases.
this. We've already been
With his bass usually, but whatever.
Fine. Let's get serious and talk about spiritualism, shall we?
This is a great job by Grabster. Great idea by you.
Yeah,
that'll be a great episode.
Yeah, Grabster, we asked him to help us out with this, so he put together a world-class article for us.
Oh, no.
When we asked him, we said, hey, how about spiritualism? Because my brother wrote his dissertation on that shit.
Right, so he just forwarded us that.
Right. It didn't even like erase his brother's first name. It just did a strike through and wrote Ed afterwards.
Easy money.
So it is like a really, really interesting phenomenon. Something I think we kind of take for granted because it pops up everywhere in our world, in pop culture. I mean, it's just a part of everything from crystal balls to seances to Ouija boards to tarot cards.
Movies.
All of this stuff. Movies, yeah. As a matter of fact, I ran across, Dan Aykroyd's huge into UFOs, right?
I did know that, actually.
He's also enormous into spirits and ghosts. It's actually one of the impetuses of him writing Ghostbusters. He's actually a fourth-generation spiritualist with a capital S, like the church spiritualist. He was raised that way. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all spiritualists, and that's how he was raised as well. So it does just kind of, it's so permeated our culture. It's weird to think of a time when it wasn't there, but there actually was this period starting right about in the middle of the 19th century, going well into the 20th century, where there was a movement that basically said the spirit world is there, it exists. When you die, your personality survives. And some people actually have the talent for communicating with the spirits in the spirit world, and we're going to start doing that. And that was spiritualism, the spiritualist movement.
Yeah, and Ed pointed out, which we should as well, that ghosts and things like that and ghost stories, they had been around since people have been around. Everyone, since the dawn of humankind, has tried to figure out, like, what happens after you die. Do people visit? Do they take on, other forms or whatever? So that's different than what we're talking about. What we're talking about is spiritualism, and that it became a big scam way to get money out of people who are in pain from friends or loved ones' death.
Exactly, yeah, for sure. But there is like a thread through there where this same era, the same period, this belief in communicating with the spirits and the idea that you could go to a seance and talk to your dead loved one or whatever, it produced this other group of people who said, yes, there
ran
are
out.
tons of
It
fraudsters.
was bugged, but I
out
noticed
there
the
where
feet
you
thing
can
left.
of this. But there's also this real, the real version of it actually does exist. And we're going to apply this newfangled thing called science to investigate it. And that produced that era of people like Charles Fort or Harry Price, who visited the Morley Rectory, the most haunted place in England, or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. These guys, no, I'm trying out a new version. These guys, they believed in this.
Oh, I need to go spin the wheel too.
They also believed in the
Oh, this should be the end of the finals anyways, and the end of the season. Which will give me my gym rat badge unless it bugs.
And there was another group who were
Bang.
we would recognize today as like pure skeptics, like the James Randys of the day, who all followed in the footsteps of Harry Houdini, as we'll see, who kind of created this. So you had hucksters, believers who were skeptical, and genuine pure skeptics who believed none of it was correct.
Yeah, and what I mentioned before, like all the previous attempts to do stuff like this, pre-mid 1800s in largely the Northeast United States, it was more religious, like prophets and shaman and stuff like that. Spiritualism was the birth of the Madame Cleos of the world. Ed refers to it as a democratization, and that's one way to look at it. But it was the idea that, hey, if you are chosen and you are special, it's not like you have to be some religious leader. You can just be a regular person with a gift.
Exactly, yeah, which was a huge sea change. And there are basically a few things that kind of came together for this mentality, this fertile kind of imagination of this pocket of America, Western New York, where all this began, to kind of take shape. And one of those things was the frontier, this frontier mentality. The historian Frederick Jackson Turner called it the significance of the frontier in American history. And he basically said, man, the people who are living out there on the frontier, they're living on the edge of civilization, the leading edge, right? Right beyond that, what they're coming up against, and this is highly debatable because part of what they were coming up against was Native America It just wasn't a civilization in the form that any European had ever encountered before. But the idea was that the people who were living on the frontier and expanding westward were basically being forced just by virtue of having to survive under these weird conditions outside of culture and civilization in the European sense. That they were having to abandon that culture and basically make it up as they went along and recreate a new culture from the frontier, and that just kind of threw the rules out the window.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things when we do topics that when you can look back at a movement and point to factors that at any other time in history, if just one of these might not have taken, might not have influenced it, that it might not have happened at all. There's something about that I've always really loved, and this is a perfect example. The frontier life is one. Religious fervor is another. And specifically in New York, in the 1800s, people were really caught up on this religious fervor, and it kind of went from town to town, and there was no big religious authorities in the area. They were out on the frontier. They had no structured hierarchy of religion, and so again, they could just make up stuff. And I'm not saying that's not tied to this next sentence because I don't want to turn anyone off, but a lot of religions sprang out from this region during that time, like Millerism and Mormonism, and Quakers and Shakers kind of had a resurgence, basically, a shot in the arm, just because of this fervor going on at the time.
And I couldn't quite put where Millerism, why it seems so familiar, and then I remembered that was the woman who gave birth eventually to Seventh-day Adventists. And that popped up in the Kellogg episode, remember?
Yeah.
Millerism was where it all started. But that really kind of indicates, and I love it when things we talked about before, like having a bit more context from something else. But that just kind of goes to show you, like, this is the kind of place where somebody could be like, I'm in contact with the spirits, or Jesus came and hung out with me, or whatever. And this is what I know and what I've been told. So let's start a religion based on it, and not even necessarily just religions too, but also like social movements, like utopian societies.
And chew your food 20 times so you'll poop scared.
Exactly. Or, women have equal rights as men, which is just completely radical. Or how about 50 of us live together, and just by the fact that we all live together, we're married according to this utopian society. Just whatever you wanted to do.
I'd like to know if that was late, to be honest, because I feel like it probably was, but I mean, I got it. It's just one or two animations that's confusing me because the jump is weird.
Yeah, for sure. And the third big factor that you mentioned was, or we haven't talked about yet, was science.
But I also hate Dwayne Wade's jumper in the corner. So, because I put the release on, am I going to hate it in the corner? Probably.
Science and things like electromagnetism and things that you can't see, but science is saying, oh, it's there. This kind of fed the spiritualist movement because, that's something else that you can't see that other people are saying is there. So they're like, well, hey, if science is saying there are things out there we can't quite explain, but trust me, it's real, then why shouldn't I believe this stuff too?
Yeah, or, this electromagnetism, maybe that actually explains how spirits survive after death. It was a really wide open time as far as, acceptance of possibilities, rather than, no, science has said this is not possible, or it can't explain this, or you can't see it with your own eyes, so it doesn't jive. Like, there was a lot more willingness among people who were scientifically minded to say, well, maybe this is a good explanation of that, let's investigate.
Yeah, the birth of science and medicine was a really crazy time.
It really was.
So should we take a break?
Yes.
Come on, man.
Yes.
I think you're in policy. People are shipping
dug up Nostradamus and put them all together in a room, and they said, wait a minute, things are going to be a little bit different. We've got the Shipathon coming. We need to warn. They were both 18th century that I also came across that we need to mention. A guy named Andrew Jackson Davis, who combined the ideas of the German hypnotist Franz Mesmer with the Swedish philosopher of the soul, Emanuel Swedenborg. They were both 18th century. He kind of brought them together. He was a bit of a nobody, but he emerged very soon after the Fox sisters became celebrities as a founder of the spiritualist movement, almost like he was doing it off in isolation at the same time that all of this began.
Yeah, so the Fox sisters figure into this really quite largely. You can even pinpoint a date to what you might consider the birth of the modern American spiritualist movement. It's March 31, 1848, in Hydesville, New York, near Rochester, at a farm. This Fox family lived there. Real people, not a family of cute little red fuzzy creatures.
Voiced by George Clooney.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. and Mrs. Fox had 3 daughters, actually. One was much older. Her name was Leah. She was 19 and 23 years older. Why was that funny?
Because I saw a picture of her, and she's like the spitting image of Jeffrey Ross. You gotta look her up. Jeffrey Ross wearing a bonnet. It's what Leah Fox looked like.
I didn't see. I saw the picture of the three of them, and I didn't get a good close up. That's an unfortunate look for him and her.
Yeah, anybody really.
And I think he would admit that too.
Oh yeah.
He's doing right.
What if he had really thin skin? A roast master. He like couldn't take a joke against. It's like, have you seen that Bump and Mike show? It's pretty good.
No. Is that the roast competition thing?
Yeah, he and Dave Attell just sit there and roast people. It's really good.
Man, I used to love David Tell back in the day.
He has just turned into like the weird like comedy genius friend that Jeffrey Ross has, and it shines through in this.
Awesome. Check it out. So the Fox family, older daughter Leia was 19 and 23 years older than younger Kate and Maggie, or I guess Maggie and Kate if you're going in that order. And on that night, on March 31st, 1848, they heard these rapping, knocking sounds, and they didn't know where it was coming from. And that kind of kick-started this whole thing. In a weird way, this led, and we'll talk about the more specifics, but in a weird way, this led to them...
I really want to hit some corner threes just to see what it feels like, but it's hard to get them off.
Are a conduit to the other side.
Yeah, the thing is...
That feels like it's going to be way faster
like,
online.
There's a ghost rapping or knocking, like a poltergeist kind of thing, to this ghost will respond to questions from the sisters through rapping and knocking, like, how old is Maggie? And it would rap like 15 times or something like that. And that really caught a lot of people's attention. And Maggie and Kate moved in with Leah. And apparently, from what I read, it was Leah whose idea was to take the show on the road and try to scam people out of money. It was not a super great person from what I read.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking of a rapping ghost. And
Right.
got sidetracked.
George Washington.
Hip it to God.
Safe and love through the compass and making your way.
You know what's funny is I was going to do that exact same thing, but for the Fox family. That's like the go-to rap for guys like us.
Oh, it totally is. Guys who can't rap.
Yeah, I'm here to say something, something, something in a something way.
Mm-hmm. The Zach Morris method, I think, is what they...
I wonder if that's based on an actual rap. I guess there was one at some point that really did that, right?
Yeah, I think Blondie was the most popular.
Yeah, I'm too tired. I shouldn't be
My
shooting.
name is Blondie. I'm here to say I'm going to try rap because it's popular today.
Exactly.
So, what were you saying? I was laughing. I didn't even notice. I'm sorry.
Oh, just that. It was basically, I was laying at Leah's feet for corrupting the younger sisters.
Yeah, she ended up managing them as a unit, I think, later on, if I'm not mistaken. But there aren't great records of everything going on at the time. But the idea was that Kate and Maggie were the ones, it wasn't really her parents, but they're the ones who could actually communicate with this barn spirit. And so they said, you know what? They not only can talk to this spirit, media starts, getting a hold of these stories. And obviously back then, it was a very big deal with something like this coming out in the media with not a lot else going on. But they moved and would go away to other places and said wherever they go, ghosts are talking to them.
Yeah.
So you guys, my daughters are talented and gifted. They're not just talking to what we think is a murder victim from our previous house.
Right, which just changed everything. And also, rather suspiciously, Leah suddenly realized that she was able to communicate with spirits too. So all three of the sisters were able to. But yeah, not just that one murder victim in their house that had been the original ghost, but just about any ghost. And this was the beginning of the spiritualist movement. But basically, it's ranked by a couple of teenage girls that got way out of hand really fast.
Yeah, and so what do? They start having these private sessions where people would pay money, and they would wear these big long dresses that were in fashion at the time, and they would, no one's exactly sure the exact mechanism, but they would do some sort of toe knocking or something where they couldn't be seen, and that was the Morse code that they said was the ghost speaking to them.
So it's really, they had like a little wooden stool under the table with them, and they would take off their shoes surreptitiously, and from what I can gather, they could pop their knuckle of their toe up and down with enough force that it would make a thud on that wooden stool.
That's creepy in and of itself.
It was. Yeah, they should have just been like, forget all this spirit stuff. Watch this weird thing.
Yeah.
But that was the phantom knocking, and we know that because Maggie later on confessed to the New York Tribune, maybe, or the Post, one of them, and said like, this is how we did it. Actually, in an effort to take her sister Leah down. But it ended up taking the spiritualist movement down in large part. But that was it, like thumping your knuckle on a wooden stool. They did this for
We're NBA champions,
years. They've been
right?
looking around the world doing that and created a new religion.
Yeah, and by the time the spiritualism fad sort of died away, the two younger sisters were, and she recanted that confession, by the way, but everyone's like, yeah, you already said it, good try. But the two younger sisters, and Maggie especially, were in pretty bad shape with alcoholism, and they died sort of in a Collier Brothers-esque way, very quietly and fairly destitute in New York City in the 1890s.
Trapped under newspapers.
Maybe.
But no, they had very interesting but also very sad lives. Like, I think Maggie married a skeptic, and he died.
Not a good move.
Right. He died. He talked her out of doing spiritualism, but she went back after he died. Kate married another spiritualist, and she had a huge career touring the world as a spiritualist, made a lot of money, but apparently lost it all. Leah, again, was just kind of, I guess, a bit of a villain in this story.
Where's that movie, man?
I was wondering the exact same thing. It's crazy it hasn't been made 50 times already, you know?
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I couldn't even find a good documentary on it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
On them, at least. I'm sure there are plenty on.
At least the champagne isn't black right now.
And no,
Give me those Fox sisters.
I was always it's like fucking spraying oil at each other. It was like, really?
Aspect of a believer who thinks like, this is where it all started, these two sisters. And there's plenty of reasons to believe if you're a credulous person, or confiding, as Mark Twain would put it, that, you know, like the Andrew Jackson Davis guy who kind of started this thing on his own, supposedly wrote on March 31st, 1848, that a spirit came to him and said, the work has begun. We just started something over here, and then later found out about the Fox sisters. Like, there's all sorts of stuff you can believe. And so it's interesting from that respect. But also, if you're just a pure dyed-in-the-wool skeptic who do not believe in any kind of afterlife or soul or anything like that, it's equally interesting in a totally different way that this whole, like, almost century-long movement started from that, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I just love it. I love this whole story.
So it's sweeping the nation at this point by the 1850s, and we're going to go over some of the different things that they would do, some of the methods that they would use to communicate with the other side, to fake communicate with the other side. The first one is channeling, and these would be trance mediums. So this is like when you've seen in a movie when someone is just talking like I am in my regular voice, and I'm entering the trance, and I'm doing a lot of showy things to kind of get people, you know, pretty pumped up, feel like they're spending their money well.
You get me pumped up, I'll tell you that.
And all of a sudden, you know, I go into this other voice, and I'm like a small child. Maybe the parents lost a child.
Wow, I got MVP my first season on this guy? That's crazy. It's not like I had that big of points or rebounds or anything.
Don't worry about me. This cat is doing just fine.
I came back to say
Usually you don't get MVP unless you play all the games.
He did it right.
That's right.
So, if you were a good, talented medium, that meant that you were probably a pretty good actor, and you could probably do good voices. Sometimes, in the case of Cora Scott, who I know we've talked about her before.
Her name sounds familiar, but I have no recollection of talking about her.
Yeah, she sounds super familiar, but she was one of the top mediums, trance mediums, because she was this very sort of demure, attractive young lady, and her whole demeanor was about that. And then she was apparently a great actor because she would go into these big, heavy, gruff voices, and the gulf between who she was and who she was imitating was so great that everyone was just like, fantastic, Cora Scott, you're a genius.
Well, also, yeah, she was like a little 12-year-old girl when she started, and supposedly she would take the stage and confidently discuss like physics and philosophy and all that stuff.
I could have just literally accepted your offer.
Authoritative spirit who would basically
Let's
take
look what this counter is.
Yeah, and I looked up her picture, and Kate Winslet, I think it's from my casting couch. Is who
I can accept that.
Okay.
1 year.
Not as the 12-year-old.
1,000 per game.
Unless they do some sort of bad Irishman de-aging, but she looked enough like her, and she's a great actor. So.
So channeling is what you kind of think of where somebody becomes possessed, the medium becomes possessed, right?
Yeah. There's
also ones where like they're just saying like, oh, I can hear what they're saying, but you can't because they're speaking to me through telepathy.
Right.
Okay. That reminds me of John Edwards. Remember him crossing over with John Edwards?
Yeah, I can't picture him. I think if I saw a picture of that, I would totally remember, though.
You would. What a weird time the 90s were as far as stuff like that goes. Although I think his show ran from 2000 to 2004.
Yeah, but that sort of coincided with the Reverend Bob Dobbs and the televangelism and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time.
So then there's automatic writing was another big one too, and all of this sound familiar again because the stuff just is so permeated into pop culture.
All right, let's see who's on the roster.
Automatic writing is instead of the medium's voice.
Still got AD.
Being, taken
we got Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Speaking
me,
spirit,
Montrezl Harrell,
spirit took over their
Schroeder, D. Rose, Caldwell Pope, Marcus Gasol, Tim Ball, Horton Tucker, Avery Bradley.
Usage or anything like that would be different
Okay.
than
So you lost LeBron
This is automatic
and
writing.
gained
I had
Antetokounmpo.
to decide if I could do that.
Which is good for the team, but not good for me because I'm a LeBron fan, you know?
Just do that to start.
Getting Derrick Rose is interesting, I guess.
And then there was a woman named Pearl Curran at least 5,000 poems, novels, and plays through automatic writing, all channeling the spirit
And
of
that could actually
17th
happen,
century
having
woman from
Enricupo and
England,
AD there. You're saying, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
That's a lot of words.
And then what about direct voice?
Montrezl Harrell's
direct
young
voice is
too.
when
That's a
you
crazy
are a
thing.
medium, you contact
Those
the
three on a
spirit,
team would be
and the spirit is so powerful
longevity.
that they just speak to you directly, like the medium is just sitting there with their mouth closed.
Yeah.
And this happened usually in a dark room where they would have a business partner just behind the curtain, obviously, talking, or maybe they were
AD's not a starter. Look at that.
Kind of deal where they're
It's
dark
hilarious.
enough where you can't really see their lips moving.
Obviously, we're going to
throwing
change
their
that.
There was a woman named Leslie Flint.
That's
Who's a medium. Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. He looked like the old man from Up.
No. Did it make you cry when you looked at him?
It did.
My daughter just watched that. Here, have these balloons. So, yeah, Leslie Flint. I actually love that name for a man, so
yeah.
I don't know why I assumed. But he would recreate famous people like Sammy Davis Jr., but wasn't very good at it, apparently, which is kind of funny. That makes us all a little bit more ridiculous and fun.
Well, I was reading an obituary about him that was written by somebody who attended one of his, or a couple, I think, of his seances. And they said things like, for a lot of times you could tell like what the trickery was or whatever, but there were other times where he would like be speaking over the voice, which is tough to do with ventriloquism. Or one time he was tested, he was made to hold colored water in his mouth while the spirit voice was speaking. And you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then you just think, well, there's always an explanation for it.
Yeah.
And, maybe there was another person who was a Confederate in the room. Who knows? But it just goes to show that even today, this guy's obituary that was written in the 1990s, that they were like, yeah, he was largely considered a trickster or fraud, but they'll still hedge and say, but there were a couple of things, and at the very least, it's unexplained, which is pretty interesting and neat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, no, there really was a spirit that was talking in the room. Thanks, Nate.
Amazing. So we had table turning. This is at this isn't like a theatrical performance. This is in a small room. Everyone, and this, you kind of think Ouija board with this. It's the same sort of thing, except the Ouija board would be the actual table that you're sitting at.
You don't really need Mark Gasol in the game at all.
And the table would move or tilt or something when you're asking
have enough
questions.
big men.
So it's inhabiting the furniture. Of course, what's going on here is either like knee movements, or sometimes they had these rings on the medium's finger that were slotted and could move the table around without anyone noticing. Just another little parlor trick, basically.
Yeah, or, the idea that you're moving the table yourself, like a Ouija board. I can't remember what it's called, but basically your body is moving without your brain being aware of it. And then there's also just the straight-up power of suggestion, and this applies to table turning and a lot of other stuff. But if you're saying, like, if you're the medium at a seance and you said the table is rising, it's rising, people who are willing to believe, a lot of people who went to seances wanted to believe or already believed in this stuff. Just the power of suggestion could be like, oh, it is raising a little bit, I can feel it, I can tell, kind of thing.
Yeah, my favorite, and I bet your favorite too, is ectoplasmic manifestations.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's pretty good. This is when you would actually, as a spiritualist, produce something physical. Something would manifest itself, an actual substance, and they called it ectoplasm. And they could pull it from their body, and it was just basically something that they would make beforehand out of whatever. I mean, they would make it out of all kinds of things. There was one story about someone who was actually gluing cut-out faces from a magazine onto dolls, and those were ectoplasm spirits. But they would hide these things sometimes like up their butt or in their other body cavities, and they would pull these things out. And some of the pictures that you see online, if you look up ectoplasm 1800s seance, is just the pictures themselves are hysterical and frightening all at the same time.
Yeah, especially now when you look back and see them, you're like, how did anybody fall for that? And it's really important to keep in mind, one, they wanted to believe, but two, these seances would be carried out in dark rooms to where you couldn't see much at all. You just suddenly see some luminous, cloth or something that you were led to believe was ectoplasm, kind of what looked like floating in the middle of the table or something like that. It's stuff that's really easy to explain, but in a darkened room that you've been sitting in for 3 hours communicating with spirits, you might be a lot more prone to buy into it than under normal circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe you're a little drunk.
Right? Tipsy on schnapps.
Levitation was another big one. Nice little party trick. I actually could sort of do this for a little while. The David Blaine method. I don't know if you ever saw his when he made himself levitate.
It's just kind of hopping up and down in the air, right?
No, it's you're thinking of trampolines.
Oh, that's not the same thing?
People can see those.
Oh, okay.
No, it's all about the angle with the David Blaine method of getting them to see you from the right angle, to where what you're really doing is you're rising your body up with just one, like just your first 3 toes on your right foot, and you're hiding that with your other foot. So it looks like you're just sort of levitating a few inches off the ground, and then you act like you're unsteady, and then you land back down and go, oh boy, that was a good one. That was pretty powerful.
So wait a minute. David Blaine can raise his entire body weight with 3 toes.
Well, I mean, he's on his toes. I could do it at the time too. This is the 90s.
Man, that's impressive. I don't think I've ever had the kind of toe strength that is required to do that.
You can raise yourself up with one foot.
In a seated position?
No, you're standing.
I got you.
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're standing there.
I got you.
And then you raise yourself off the ground with just the toes on your right foot, let's say, and you're keeping your left foot, it's shielding that so you can't quite see it.
Yeah, no, I got it.
And it just creates, if you got someone at the right angle, and I got pretty good at it. My roommate Justin was like, you're getting better, mate.
Oh, I'm getting drunker.
Well, both of those things are happening.
I thought you were talking about, like a fake ear or something like that, where they're sitting cross-legged and they're I was like, to do that with just 3 toes, that in and of itself is pretty impressive. But
that's pretty good. All right, what are the other? There's another couple of things they did too.
Spear photography, pretty straightforward stuff where, this
I always like looking at the, who went where.
Exposures unless you were a photographer.
Right.
But if you were, you could do all sorts of neat stuff like double expose something, put a ghostly face in the
Pacers
background
are fucked as
all.
That's great.
I saw a spirit photograph where it was a ghostly arm. It also could have been a genie coming out of a bottle, one of the two. It looked exactly the same. But it was it was on a table, so they were like, this is a spirit arm levitating on the table. So they're like tying 3 things together, table turning, levitating, and spirit photography.
Those are great. I think the spirit photography, just because they were taking advantage of this new technology people didn't even understand.
Right. It was like the deep fake of the time.
And they were probably like, everybody, we got maybe 3 years.
Yeah, we better get prolific.
And then everyone's going to be like, oh, that's just double exposure.
Right. And then people, like I said earlier, too, a lot of the New Age stuff that's tied into spiritualism today, like tarot readings or, astrology, that kind of stuff, that had nothing to do with this because spiritualists, all of it grew out of Christianity. So there's some Christian
fucking Clippers, are you serious?
All of the spiritualist
So,
practices.
it looks like
in a lot of ways,
LeBron went to the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard went somewhere else.
There was no
What
scripture
the fuck?
doctrine or anything like that. It was still very much tied into and born out of Christianity. So stuff like occult things would have been very much frowned upon by spiritualists.
Well, as soon as they give me the chance, I'll try to trade for him. I don't know how long it's going to be, though. Kawhi Leonard went to the Bulls.
Civil War had to do with all of this. Right after this.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh, yeah, I should check and make sure that my shit went through.
About your website that doesn't look good. It lied. I'll show everyone.
BetterHelp is an affordable option.
Alright, so here's the important moment. Because if for some reason it bugged up and did not give me my gym rat badge, I have to put in a whole nother day work. It didn't. Okay, we're good. Still have the gym rat badge. So that's awesome. That's the main reason you even, the reason I do this is you do it this way, you practice, a jumper, you get gym rat badge at the same time, get some VC. No, we're gonna keep playing though. And yeah, keep getting some VC, keep practicing this jumper, see if it's what I want before I end up going online. I should take a piss first though. Yeah, I'm gonna go take a piss real quick. I'll be right back. Put this up. Wait. Gym rat badge. I'll be right back. I'm gonna eat my ramen. I'll be back in a bit. It's not quite done yet.